This is the presentation of my professional portfolio. I'm Grant Gilchrist. I'm taking one class this summer out from Eugene, Oregon to graduate, and I'm going to do a YouTube video for you to watch. Um, my big adventure this past year, besides having another baby, here's Lincoln, born in December. He's actually crawling around at my feet right now, so if you hear some crying, I'll pause and take care of that. My big adventure was flipping my Algebra 2 trig class. I made videos, put them online, and had kids watch them. They'd come to class, work on homework, and I would walk around and help them answer their questions, do some problems on the board, whatever I can during that time. Since I flipped the class last year and I can't be with you this year, though I'd like to, I figured it'd be appropriate if I taught this reflection as if it was one of my videos. So you can't see me, I'm just talking into my computer's microphone while using the smart notebook that I use for my smartboard. And since you can't see me, I figured here you just get a look at, here's what I look like. This is me, the guy talking to you. That's the face behind the beautiful voice you're hearing. And here's me at 14 weeks. There's my face. This is the original selfie. And we'll just get going. Try to follow the mouse, stay a step ahead of me, and read along if you'd like to. I won't always be reading the exact things that are written here on the board, on the screen, but they kind of worked as prompts for me. The content classes that I took were analysis, geometry, discrete linear stats, and number structures. I missed abstract and modeling, which make me very sad because I think I would have liked them a lot. Analysis was the first class that I took. I heard about the MSMME program about 4 or 5 days before the class was set to start, actually, from a couple colleagues. I went home, talked to my wife about it, looked online. In the span of about 6 hours, maybe, I went from hearing about this program to deciding I need another degree, and I enrolled. I made a phone call to MSU. They were kind of short on students, so they raced to put me in after some immunizations and medical clears to make sure that I wouldn't get people sick online. I got enrolled in the class about 3 days late. I'm a fussy kid, so I'm going to pause. Okay, I'm back. Now, for you, that was about half a second. For me, that was a diaper, a glass of milk, and some fussing. Analysis was a stark introduction to a program. It was a very hard class, took a lot of time, it was very legit math. We learned about the density of numbers and definition of continuity. It was a class that I was up till very late in the morning very many times during the school year, and I thought, what have I gotten myself into in this program? But at the same time, I really enjoyed it. I came away with a lot of little nuggets to share with my students in terms of cardinality and infinity and how the number system works, and I'm always surprised at how much of that class actually makes its way into my teaching. The next class I took was geometry. It was a fun, reassuring class that had a few missed opportunities in terms of I wish I'd learned some more about hyperbolas. One thing that I liked about it, though, is we did taxicab geometry. And taxicab geometry is how does a taxicab travel in New York City, which is laid out like a grid. This character here can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces. He can travel 7 spaces in any direction. So every blue square is a square he could walk to, and every red square is a square he could attack, and this is essentially taxicab geometry. A circle in taxicab geometry looks like a diamond with all these little corners in our regular geometry. It's interesting how when you put something in the way, here's this random little square that you can't reach at all. Can't attack it, can't walk to it. I came away with this class realizing that I've always tried to make some games out of the math that I teach, but I should try and make some math out of the games that I play more and more often, because I know that kids like to play the same sorts of games. Summer 2013, I took discrete in Bozeman. That was my first and only time in Bozeman. That's where I sat next to Callie all day during discrete and linear, and we would race to get problems done. She would usually win. That was a fun class, covered lots of good things. I appreciated the combinatorics from it, but linear was the really tough one. And the main thing that I came with from this was how to be a student again. I behaved like students in my class that are stressed about math. We learned tons of material that moved very quickly, and I remember going into quizzes feeling like I had a very tenuous grasp on the material that I'd learned, and knowing we had a quiz on this stuff, and that I was going to forget something, and was trying to memorize all these formulas and rules and rubrics and things, and I would just do the stupidest things and make the dumbest mistakes on these quizzes. And, we'd turn them in and walk out the door, and 10 minutes later I'd be like, oh my gosh, did I really do all that work when all I had to do was say the answer was 7 or something along those lines? And I could suddenly remember what it was like to be a student in math class. And I've related, I think, to my students in class much better after that. It was also in GeoGebra was, Beth convinced me that it was better than Sketchpad. Shlomo raised me on Sketchpad, but GeoGebra has more power behind it, has the algebra, and it's been the tool that I've been using more and more. These smartboards actually have a GeoGebra app right here, so I could do GeoGebra constructions in Smartboard if I wanted to, which is fun. Summer of 2014, I took stats with tinker plots and randomization. I had never taken much stats class, just one class in college and a little bit in high school, so I enjoyed having tinker plots and it's exploring that. Tinker plots is actually a program I used in class a lot until my license ran out. I like to randomize students and groups, like to pull up test scores and show how they looked on the tinker plots, even pull students' names out of cards. Number structures, I also took that class, and I seriously had no recollection of this class of any sort until I pulled up my transcript and thought, wait, I took two classes that summer? I don't think I learned much in this class. It was basically number theory and stuff I'd done before, so I'm just going to move on from it. Next was pedagogy classes. This assessment class, which was fall of 2014, that actually feels a little bit off. That might have been summer 2014. Doesn't really matter. Anyways, oops, I was going to show that later, but it's up there now. I would call this the Get to Know Your Kids class. One thing that I did was I used Poll Everywhere, which lets students use their cell phones to answer questions that are from the board. Now, these are some questions that I posed. One was kind of mathy, one was just kind of fun, but it was my living learning lab for this class, how to try and take technology that kids have and use it as a tool instead of as a distraction. This is also, I think, the main thing that I came away from this class is to get to know your kids. Assessment isn't so much about assigning the proper grade, although it clearly is, but more about knowing what your kids know, knowing what they don't know, knowing how to get that information out of them, and how to use that information. This was also where we were introduced to the idea of writing something about your students down every day. Maybe not every student, but you have some interaction or somebody asks some question, you make some observation, you write it down and attach it to them, and you can develop kind of this portfolio of information about your students that sounds kind of creepy if you're not a teacher, but it's something that I always want to do, and I haven't because A, I've never taught the same kids before until last year was the first time I've had kids more than once. By that I mean I had freshmen again as juniors. And I know the teachers that come after me wouldn't really make any use of the material, so I didn't think it was worth my time. But now with the iPads and the videos, I think I've got some opportunity for that. Curriculum design was understanding by design, where you took a unit and kind of really broke it down into its critical pieces, its essential questions and its tasks and all these things. I had done UBD before and my master's work at Oregon State, but really enjoyed the opportunity to do it again. It's something that, as a good teacher, like if I were a good teacher, I would do this for most every chapter that I teach. Because the chapters that I've done it on, now I've done it on logarithms and inverses. Those two chapters I think I teach really, really well now. And it's something where if I had the time or the motivation or the chance, I think I would try and do this process on more units in my book. Learning theory was Dewey and Piaget primarily. It's where I started thinking about flipping a classroom because some of the things we'd come across with the learning theory just sort of indicated that there's benefit to a flipped classroom and there's research behind it, and some of the stuff that we came across just sort of led me towards this idea more and more. It's also, sometimes I would leave the stuff I was reading for this class and find articles on flipping a classroom and look into it, because at this point I was pretty sure I wanted to try it at least for a brief period of time. Learning theory will come up a little bit more later on. And then standards is the class that I'm taking right now. The school that I'm at is private and it's old school. They don't want to integrate the program. They just want to do Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. And we have no need for Smarter Balanced or Common Core. In Oregon, we do a bunch of really stupid tests that kids take, and then it gets changed 3 years later to some new test that kids take. And it's a big waste of money and time in everybody's opinion, and the Portland schools in particular are really starting to lash back at it. But at my private school, there's no need for that. Or no pressure for it. So things about the standards that I really like, specifically the practices, which I adore and I want to put on my wall and tattoo on kids' foreheads and everything, those things I'm going to incorporate as much and as well as I can. But the nice thing about the standards at my school is I can kind of pick and choose the ones that I think fit and are worthwhile, while recognizing there's a value in the Common Core as a whole. And I'm thankful to know things about it for kids that come into my school from Common Core schools as time moves forward. In case you forgot what I look like, here are my last 3 student IDs. So again, there's my face. I was a bit too white for this one. This is kind of more tan after summer, so I have to work on that this year. I'll talk briefly about the flipped class thing now. I'm sitting at 9 minutes, so I won't go too much longer. To answer your questions, all my students have the internet at home. I checked that in advance. We have a library with computers they can use if they need to, and I didn't really have a way to check who did and didn't watch the videos. I could just see a total view count, but I couldn't see who did and didn't watch. I think I can make that happen next year if I want. We have Schoology for our learner management system that I use this year, but I think there's ways I can use that. Here's why I did it. One day, I showed up to class. It was the unit circle in spring, and it's a huge lesson, one that I've spent hours working on, one that I use on a block day, so I think 80 some minutes, and I've got graphics and displays and things moving. It's a really big lesson, and I show up to class, and two-thirds of them aren't there. They're at a track meet, and they're at a golf tournament, and they're sick, and they're gone swimming or at the lake. I don't know what, but most of my students aren't there, and I'm so full of despair, really. And so I figure I'll just push this little video button up here and record a class just like this one and throw it online and see what happens. Kids would come to me over the next week and say, I missed that big block day. I heard it was really important. Can you run me through it? And I would say, it took an hour. Go watch the video. And they all did, and they all came back and said, that was really helpful, thank you. And lots of kids that were even there in class that day went back and watched it. So that was kind of my first foray of thinking, okay, this can work. And I went for it. I've talked about how I don't want to take technology and ignore it. I don't want it to be a distraction. I want it to be a tool. Things like Pull Everywhere was an example of that. And so since all my kids have smartphones, and next year all my kids will have iPads, I figured I should find some way to use this technology to my advantage, and I wanted to flip the class. The learning theory also was being supported that I learned in the program here. So I've kind of explained briefly how it works. I'll go over this very quickly. The first chapter I did it on was chapter 4, because the first 3 chapters are review. So chapter 4 is matrices, which is very procedural, so I thought it'd be a good introduction. Students go home and watch the videos, which I try to keep under 10 minutes. This is already over 10 minutes, and so it feels long. They take a quiz on Schoology that would be graded. They'd come to class the next day and work, and then homework was due the day after that. Things that I had to figure out. I had to be very, very organized. I usually just base tomorrow's lesson on what happened today, and I kind of do it a day at a time, and I like that flexibility, but that didn't work with this system because kids were getting very stressed about knowing what was due when, and which days were work days, and which days were video days, and it was very hectic at first, so I had to get way more organized and start living by a calendar. Spreading a lesson over 3 days was hard for me to get used to, but didn't cause problems with the students like I thought it would. I thought they'd start to confuse yesterday's video with today's material and tomorrow's video and all those things, so it wasn't a problem. It didn't work. It didn't work to have a colleague write the quizzes. I had a teacher that did this with me, and I'd make the videos, and she would write the quizzes, and that just wasn't a good team up. So we halted that after a while, and students hated those video quizzes. Here's some scores I'm going to skip over. In fact, I'll skip over this one too, because here's the same chart here. The blue line here represents this year when I did the videos. The red line was the year before, no videos, and the green line was the year before that, no videos. As you can see in the blue line, when the videos started, they did, about as well, a little bit less, but then with quadratics, they did substantially better. This was kind of the first main Algebra 2 trig class, or topic. Last 2 years, they'd really gotten hammered by this chapter. This year, they did a lot better, and the scores kept improving until trig. I'll show you what happened with trig and why I think that went downhill so quickly. But the class average for all the tests was higher, and these with mostly the same test. The standard deviation, was a little bit bigger because some kids I think did a little worse because of the videos, but a lot of kids did a lot better. Most kids spoke favorably about the system. The biggest complaints students had were about the video quizzes. I found that kids were watching the videos whether or not they took the quizzes. So here at chapter 9, I stopped doing video quizzes where they didn't have to take a quiz after watching the video, and that worked for one chapter. And they pretty clearly stopped watching the videos after that. So that's an issue. And I lost the faith with trig, and what I mean by that is here is conic sections, and then here's our trig chapters. I was so concerned that students wouldn't understand the concepts of trig, that they would need to see me actually working things out at the board, and that I could take their questions in real time. And so I made videos still, and I still flipped the class, but I also started teaching class, and I kind of did a hybrid, and it just didn't work very well. And so I think that's the main reason why these things started to fall down. And that, and like I said, kids stopped watching the videos, I think because there weren't quizzes attached to it and because it was springtime and they were getting lazy. I was surprised to find that kids could still learn, even the conceptual stuff. When I taught a conceptual lesson, they came back and they understood it. No one came to me for help anymore, which I was shocked by. I used to be totally slammed by kids before and after school, and nobody was coming anymore because they'd just go watch the video again, or they'd rewind, or they'd pause, they'd do things again on the video. I, however, felt out of rhythm all year. It was a totally different experience for me. I feel like I didn't know my students very well. I feel like I didn't know what they did and didn't know at any given time. For me, it was all a very odd experience to kind of have nothing to do during the period. You didn't get to see me do air quotes around that word do, but I felt like I wasn't teaching so much as just like, I don't know, proctoring or observing or shepherding. I don't know what the right term is, but just watching these kids work. And that's an adjustment that I've kind of improved on over time. Next year, I'm going to better train them on how and when to ask questions. As you can see here, you can't ask me a question right now. You're just stuck listening, and if you want, you can pause and rewind, but you can't say, hey, wait, what do you... And some students would email me questions, but I'm trying to get them to write them down when they happen, and even write down the time in the video when it happens, so we can pull it up and look at it when they come to school. I've been working hard to not take their time from them, but I need to be more willing to do that, and by that I mean I didn't like that I would make them watch a video at home, and I didn't want to have them come to class and have another lecture. I figured when they came to class, that was their work time, that was only fair, but I need to be better about having them doing explorations and things like that. But now, here's kind of where I'm going to tie all this up in with my reflections and everything. Oop, that was a bit early. Now with these videos, our classes are really short. They're like 42 minutes. And I don't have a lot of time to do all the stuff that I want to do, to have kids writing and journaling, to really let them explore problems, for me to jot down notes about them, to do labs, all kinds of things. But I think with this new system, I can maybe start to squeeze that into it. I also know that next year I'm going to lean into the videos more, and by that I mean not kind of back off when I think things get too conceptual, but rely on it heavier. It's really helping me to become the teacher I want to be, and, excuse me, and by that I mean, I'm going to have to put you on pause for 1 second. Oh, I apologize about that. This right here is the teacher that I want to be, the guy that takes the same photo every year and then shows it to his students and his staff when he's all done. And I feel equipped now to be the teacher that I want to be the guy that is organized and can organize to the point that I can have students doing the things that I was discussing, like journaling and taking notes on them, use the practices and use the standards, have more content knowledge, and better equip my students to become real thinkers as opposed to just math doers. I wish in the program I learned more math. That's mostly a complaint about how my schedule worked out. There was a couple times when I wasn't able to take math classes, when I had a wedding like I did this summer or other issues. I complain about not learning math everywhere, but I'm always eager to have more and more of it, and it's nice for me to know that even though I've been doing this program for a few years, I'm not opposed to continually learning math. And finally, I'm just super tired. I'm gonna go take a nap as soon as this is all done. I just realized this is not a joke. I did this whole entire thing without wearing pants.